Yeah, I missed yours as well, so I'm really sorry. Did it win? Good? Okay. Oh, thanks, man. That's awesome. Yeah. So I'm working from home. Really something. Thanks. Talk to you later, man. Sorry? How are you? Yeah. Nice meeting you again. How are you? Fine, and you? Yeah, I'm good. What? Oh, no. Not at all.
No picture.
Oh, yeah, I know. I was just
It's
not
like,
ready yet.
come on.
Okay.
Doesn't like that. Give it a second. Are you seeing anything down there?
Okay.
Do you have his slides? Because it's not up here. It's down there, but not up here. Take a look real quick.
Yeah, sure.
You got slides again? All right, page Adrian. I don't know what's going on.
Could it be the center view?
Well, so it goes from here to a splitter over there.
Okay.
And we're getting it over there.
Check the
So,
sound. So how do you turn this one on and off? Oh, just a switch?
Huh?
Hello? Hello? Should I get it here or do I need it higher?
we need a little higher. Go for it.
Hello? Cool.
There you go.
Thanks.
Still nada? Your laptop's not liking this. Come on. God damn it. It's that side? All right. It's not the cable.
It worked fine yesterday in the other room.
It's not working here either. Well, shit, it changed. We were just using it.
I can hold it for you.
Thanks. I'm gonna check this out.
Maybe plug in and out the projector?
It's showing down there, so it's making it to the switch.
Okay.
We'll go ahead and plug back in.
Find Jason. Yeah, he just paged him to. Said you paged him? Yeah. He said on which channel? I don't have. Okay.
Hey!
Hey! I rebooted the switch.
Which way?
So off and on again, fixes everything. Cool. Can everyone in the back hear me okay? You raise? Okay, cool. So, wow, big crowd. Awesome. So my talk is called Apple-Apocalypse Now, and it's a talk about different bypasses for AppLocker, but not only bypasses, but also mitigations. So hopefully you will enjoy this talk. I've been excited to talk about this for a long time now, so yeah, I'm really looking forward to this. So briefly about myself, my name is Oddvar Moe, and I worked with IT since early '99. I took my first Microsoft certification when I was 16 years old, so I was pretty early in the game. The last 6 years, I've been focusing on security. Both pen testing, but also hardening environments, Windows environments. So previously, I worked as a Microsoft consultant. I've done a lot of training. I speak a lot. And as a result of that, I'm also a Microsoft MVP within cloud and data center management. And I've been that for 3 years. I'm a huge fan of memes and GIFs, so I really love presentation that includes that. And as of this Monday, I started working at TrustedSec. So, yeah, thanks. Appreciate it. Okay, so I'm from Norway, right? And you're probably thinking, oh, you live way up north. You ride polar bears and kill seals and all that stuff. No, it's not that. As you can see on the map here, we are approximately around here somewhere, maybe a little lower. I live up there. So that's a great length to swim, for sure. So I don't know if you noticed this, but on maps, there are different things. Like, for instance, in Italy, they have this shoe. You seen this before? Yeah. And I heard someone told me that Texas looked like a finger. Is that correct? Yeah. So there are different maps that kind of you can use your imagination to like see things. We have one in Scandinavia as well. But we don't brag about it. Okay? Because the Italians are like, oh, we got to see you. Okay. So if you're from Russia, this is not meant as an insult. That's important to me, okay? This is just a joke. So, and when you first see this, you cannot unsee it. This is just one of those things that kind of hit you in the face and you can't forget them. Okay, ready? Okay, can you see it? I'll help you. So, I didn't finish the drawing because I think something needs to be like left for the imagination. Yeah, funny. He's a pervert. All right, so enough with the funny stuff. So why am I talking about App Locker? First of all, it's because I have implemented that product at several customers, and I've also like tried to bypass it a lot of times in several environments. And to me, it's like a product that often gets misunderstood on what it is and what it's not. So I want to like get it out there how it is and show you how easy it is to get started and all that stuff. So that's one of my motivations behind this. And as I said, I have implemented many customers. I've heard that it's not that common in the States to have App Locker enabled at bigger companies. So anyone here uses App Locker? Wow, that's a huge bunch, man. Cool. Okay, so one thing I see is that this product is often overlooked. And many customers have like enterprise licenses and have it for free. They can use it. It's just a matter of enabling it and configuring it correctly. So people tend to forget this product. And this talk is for both sides. So I have some cool stuff for the red side and hopefully some cool stuff for the blue side. So I hope you appreciate that. Right. So what I will cover, I will give you an overview of App Locker, how you configure it, like from a default perspective, and just go over some basics, like how to configure a rule and all that stuff. And then I will show you some different bypass techniques that are important to be aware of. That's the apocalypse part. And I will be dropping on you, I'm doing quotation mark new because I haven't seen it before, a constrained language mode bypass. So when you enable App Locker, it will change PowerShell from a full language PowerShell into a constrained mode language PowerShell. So this, I have a working bypass for that. And I will also be releasing a PowerShell module. It's not 100% done, but it's good enough to like release it here, I feel. So yeah, good enough for you guys. I'm just kidding. No, but it works. So, but I haven't like polished it 100%, and not everything is implemented and all that stuff. But yeah. All right. So App Locker, it's one of Microsoft's whitelisting solutions, basically. It's a product you use to tell what is allowed to run on the endpoint and not. And instead of like telling it everything it should block, you're telling it what it's supposed to be allowed to run. That's whitelisting. And it's, if you have worked with Microsoft products from back like XP and 2003 servers, you maybe remember something called software restriction policies. These are, App Locker is the version 2 of that. So this is like the next generation software restriction policy. The big difference between software restriction policy 1 and 2 is that version 1, you didn't need like a special kind of license. But in App Locker, the version 2, you need to have an enterprise or an education SKU in your Windows. There's a star there, and that's because there is an exception to that rule. And if you use model management, you can actually enable App Locker through with Pro Edition of Windows as well. But you have to configure it differently. So you have to like take XML files and embed them in the Intune portal and all that stuff. But I haven't seen anyone done it yet, but I know it's possible. And app locker is a part of the defense in-depth strategy to Microsoft. So it's just another of their products to like harden stuff as much as they can. And you can allow and you can deny execution of stuff. You can base it on the publisher, that's the certificate. So if you have a binary that's signed, you can tell it to either allow it or deny it based on that certificate. And that's pretty awesome. It's hard to fake. Or you can base it on the hash of the file or just the path where it's located in the disk. Okay. What AppLocker is not? It's not a security boundary. And there have been many reports to Microsoft where we have highlighted like problems with AppLocker, but they always tell this is not a security boundary. It was designed for compliance. So that's what they're telling us. But still, it's a great product that I really feel is needs to be deployed more. And it's if you see here, this is the latest blog from Microsoft. The criteria of getting like a CVE or serviced. It clearly stated here that AppLocker is not going to be serviced. So this is something they don't like really care about. But if you find a serious enough bug, they will probably fix it anyways. But yeah, it's a different story. And it's not a true whitelisting solution, to my opinion, because I try to take AppLocker and only allow what I want. I booted a machine. I like kind of logged what happened during logon, and I whitelisted all the different things that ran, and did that like 10 times. And then I turned on the policy to enforce it, and it crashed. So that doesn't work. And that's how a whitelisting solution should work, right? So there's something in the operating system. I haven't figured it out. I've reached out to Microsoft about it, but I didn't get any help. So to me, it's not a true whitelisting solution. That's my opinion, at least. Another important thing, it's not meant to protect admins. Because if you're an admin, AppLocker is easily to bypass. For real, it is. I have a blog post about it, so if you're interested in why, you can read about it there. Okay, so let's go over some basics. Let's configure our AppLocker policy from the start up. Let me show you how easy it is. Right? Let's see. I think I need to do like this. Oops. Duplicate. All right. So everyone can see this. Cool. So this is the domain controller in my lab domain. Maybe it's kind of hard to see in the back. I'm sorry, I don't have Zoom it or anything, so I will tell you what I do. So I have a predefined organizational structure inside Active Directory for computers. And I've created a dummy organizational unit called Demo OU DerbyCon. So we're going to start here by just creating a group policy. That is as easy as just right-clicking, create a GPO, and link it here. Then we're just going to call it like AppLocker policy. If I can type, that's hard. And then you just right-click the policy, go into Edit, and then you browse yourself down into Policies, Windows Settings, Security Settings, and under the Application Control Settings. And this is where you live when you configure AppLocker. So here you have different sections. You have executable rules, you have Windows installer rules, you have script rules, and you have packaged app rules. So what you normally do is that when I start a policy, I just right-click every section, and I use to create the default rules. It's a good starting point, because what it does is that it says that an administrator is allowed to run everything on a box, right? That makes sense. And we have a rule that allows everything under the Windows folder to run and everything under the program files folder to run. And the idea behind this is that if a normal user is not allowed to place files within the Windows folder or the program files folder. So you as an admin allows it by installing software, right? So that makes sense. So the default rules are pretty good. So just go through them. And there's one thing missing that I see all the time. And I've seen a lot of claimed bypasses about AppLocker, and they haven't like configured something called DLLs. There's a section for DLLs as well, and AppLocker is a waste of time if you don't enable that. So you need to go to, you right-click on AppLocker, go into Properties, go into the Advanced tab here on the top, and then you need to enable that, enable the DNL rule collection. Click Apply, click OK, and then you got the DLL rules here as well. Do the same for them. And they state here that it affects performance. It does not, for real. Okay, maybe back when we had like Windows XP and stuff, it could affect a little, but today, no. It doesn't affect the performance. And even if it did, I would still turn it on. All right, and after you configured all the rules, you need to enforce them. You can either do it by starting off by just doing an audit. What will happen then is that every time a binary runs on a client, it will log it to the event log. So you can like take it out and see what would have been blocked if the rules were applied enforced. So I just enforce everything like this. And already now we have a pretty good, decent protection on the endpoints for malware. Just like that, we're done. There's one more thing, by the way. We need a service to run. That's the application identity service. This also needs to be turned on. It's not on by default. So you have to go in and configure it, define it, hook it on to automatic, and boom. Now the application identity service will start to run on the clients, and it will apply or enforce the AppLocker rules, and we're good to go. So that's how long it took to apply an AppLocker policy, a default AppLocker policy. And then you have to deal with all the exceptions, of course, but that's another story. Right. And when we have enforced this policy, we can move over to a client, run GP update, and then you can test it out by just trying to run a binary outside the program files folder or Windows folder, and it will say that it is blocked by group policy. Or you will get an alert like this if you double click it. That's how easy it is. Right. This was the default setup. That's the one I prefer. I've tried a lot of different setups. So we have, you can, for instance, only allow different publishers. So everything's signed by Microsoft, by Google, by Apple, and all the other companies. The problem with that approach is that sooner or later you'll figure out that a lot of binaries, even from Microsoft, isn't signed, especially DLLs. So you will end up in a situation where you need to make a lot of exceptions to that base rule where you allow only signed binaries. So I don't like that approach. So I always end up using the default rules because I think that's better. You also have the chaos approach. That's what I call it. You can use AppLocker to automatically generate rules for you. And it will scan program files and Windows folder, whatever you choose, and it will calculate the hash of everything, and it will also create one rule for each file, and it will create a rule for almost each publisher, and you end up with a huge amount of rules, like a couple of hundreds. So you lose control. I don't like that approach. I don't recommend it at all. And there's a new boy in town called AaronLocker. A guy at Microsoft called Aaron Mergosis has created a lot of great scripts to automate the entire process. I have played a little with it, and it's freaking good. So if you're starting out with AppLocker and need to maintain it over time, I would start by looking into AaronLocker. That's a tip from me. It's really good. Okay. So I did a lot of work to get that background moving. Really proud of that. It's like an earthquake. It's the apocalypse, you know. Good stuff. Okay, so The default rules. So we have the default path rules. That was the one we created, right? So the problem with that is there are exceptions where a user is allowed to place binaries within the Windows folder. So the default ACLs on Windows isn't that good. So you need to harden even more. And as you can see in the bottom here, these are, you can download something called access check from sysinternals, and you can run these commands here to pipe out every folder you have write access to as a normal user. And you need to do it for users, everyone, authenticated user, and interactive to get all the ACLs. That's an important step. There's a link there if you're too lazy to write these out. And also, third party. I've seen a lot of cases where you install a software in program files, and the ACLs are all screwed up. They forget to harden it, so the user can inject files there. That's not a good thing. Yeah, so do access check, basically. Just run it, see what you're allowed to do, and you will discover something mind-blowing. So what are you looking for when you're looking for exceptions to the default ACLs or the weaknesses? Well, you're looking for places where you can create files, write data, or create folders, or append data, list folder, read data. That's important things you look for. And also the execute file permission. That's a good one. Okay. So let's go over an example here. In this example, the user is part of the users group, and the users group has access to the folder under the dummy folder called only files, where he is allowed to only create files and write data. That's the only permission he has, right? Okay? So he's not allowed to execute anything, he's only allowed to write data. But, and there's a big but, there are two different approaches you can do to use this to bypass AppLocker. Okay? You ready? So just to prove my point, here's under the C tools folder on this computer, you can clearly see that AppLocker blocks execution, right? Even though authenticated user has the ACLs or read and execute. So you can clearly see that it's AppLocker that is blocking me, not the ACLs, okay? And we know that we can create files into that folder. So normally you would just try to copy the file into the program files folder and try to execute it. And as you can see, I have a different error message. It's not AppLocker blocking me now, it's the ACLs, okay? So AppLocker approved it, but the ACLs blocked me. There's two ways of getting around this. So the one I think is the coolest one is to use something called hard links. So instead of copying a file, you can use either fsutil or mklink to create a hard link where you create like a fake file called something else, whatever, linked autoruns, and then you link it to the original file. And when you then try to execute the hard linked file, AppLocker will say, okay, you're trying to execute from program files, you're good to go. And then it will redirect the execution to the folder I have execution rights on. So it will pop up magically. That's pretty cool. So another way of doing this, in this example, I'm using folders, but it could be files as well. So in this example, I have the create folder right and the permission to read them as well. So what you can do, you can create a folder under that folder. So you create a new folder called create folders right. And if I check the ACLs afterwards, I don't have any rights on that folder. So I'm not allowed to do anything with it, right? Wrong. Because if I run iCackles and grant everyone permission, I'm allowed to actually add rights. What the Isn't that strange? It's not. This is by design. You may be going like this. That was the reaction I was hoping for. Okay, so what is this evil sorcery? It's basically the thing that in Windows that you have something called an owner. So every time a user creates something, you become the owner of that object. And if you look it up on TechNet, it clearly states, under the how permissions work, an owner of an object always has the ability to read and change permissions on the object. Aha! So I, as an owner, can actually change everything on that object. So that's pretty cool. So I just as I did, I changed the ACLs. So now I can just copy the file in and execute it. Easy to bypass. So that's something to think of. So you might be going like this when you start to look at the ACLs on the Windows, because you will find out there's plenty of folders where the user actually has rights. I have mapped out most of them and described the different techniques you can use. So there's a link there at the bottom. I love Deadpool, by the way. He's cool. And to my big surprise, that's not the only places. There's even more. If you have deployed Configuration Manager, anybody here uses Configuration Manager? Some? Cool. There's even more folders under there you need to protect. So it's pretty easy to bypass if you look for the right things. So yeah, SCCM, something to think about. And when it comes to third party, here's an example of a bypass I found, not that recently, like a half year ago or something, around TeamViewer. They screwed up the rights. So they had actually read and write access to some log files under the TeamViewer folder. And you could either just pipe an exe file into that file, or you can, I used alternate data streams because I think that's cool. So I added bginfo here as an example into the stream of that file, and then you can execute it directly. So I tweeted out, and they fixed it, so that's cool. All right. Let me quickly show you, let's see, I can show you a bypass. Let's take, we can use the alternate data stream. Okay. Let me just fire up my good old friend command prompt. So I'm logged in as a normal user here. So under the, I think it's the temp folder I prepared. Yeah, I have autoruns.exe, right? Hopefully I'm not allowed to run it. It's blocked. Cool. So a cool thing you can do with alternate data streams is that you can actually take the file, and then you can pipe it to, for instance, C Windows tracing auto exe. And now I place the file under C Windows tracing, but you cannot see it. It's in stream on that folder, so it's pretty good hidden. So if I go into Explorer, let's see here. There's no, okay, so here's a little leftovers from my playtime. But there's nothing to see here, basically. It doesn't state there's an exe file connected to the folder. So the only way to see it is to do a dir r, and there's probably multiple things into that folder right now because I have used its computer a lot. So let's just take a look. Oh, tracing. So here you can see the different streams, and that's NTFS. That's a feature of NTFS. So this you can actually execute using, for instance, vmic, create, tracing order.exe, and boom, we're running autoruns from a folder. That's pretty awesome. And the problem is when you create blocking rules, because you want to block like tracing. The tracing folder, you want to block that from execution, right? But the problem is you have to think of the alternate data streams as well, and this is something people tend to forget. So I will show you. So what I prefer to do is to, instead of having one group policy where I shove in all the whitelisting rules and all the blocking rules and all that stuff, I like to create different group policies. So I create one on the top that are the whitelisting rules, mostly the default rules with some tweaks. And then I create different blocking rules for the different things. That way I have full control over each thing. So if, oh, that was a XC path that was blocked, okay, let me look, and then I go straightly in here and I'll find it easy. So that's a good practice, at least in my opinion. So here's an example of blocking rules. You cannot see it here, but because I have not included the alternate data stream blocking rules yet. So this will not block the demo I just showed. This will still allow me to use alternate data stream to execute. So what you need to do is to block alternate data streams as well. So a normal rule will look like this on the right side. And on the left side, you can see I've added a colon and a star. So you need to do that in order to block alternate data streams for executing. So that's an important step. So there's a great blog by G. Hastinger about this problem that I recommend that you read. Okay. When it comes to third party, what I normally recommend is that you contact the developer or the company. In this case, where I had TeamViewer, I contacted them over Twitter. And I said, all you have to do there, TeamViewer, is to block execution on that file. And we're good to go. So they did that. They added a specific deny execution on that file. So even though you have write access, you cannot use it to execute anything. So that's a proposed fix. Okay. So that was the default path rules. So now you see the problems with that and what you need to harden and what you can use to bypass it. Let's skip over to script rules. So what you can do with script rules is that if you have an environment that has upgraded from Windows 10 earlier build to newer builds, you will probably have PowerShell version 2, meaning that you can start PowerShell TAC version 2. And this will bypass an important function called constrained language mode, which locks down PowerShell. So if you run PowerShell version 2, it will actually run in full language mode, meaning that you can add things into memory and do all sorts of nasty stuff. So, and another cool thing when you do this as an attacker is it doesn't get logged, because PowerShell version 2 didn't have logging. So, so you need to remove that stuff if you want to be safe. Fortunately, the newest version of Windows 10, when you install it, 1803, it doesn't include version 2. It's off by default now, so that's a good thing. But if you have an environment that has been upgraded over time, you can still see it. So yeah. So the proposed fix is, of course, to remove it. So the coolest way is to use PowerShell to remove version 2 of PowerShell, of course. That's the proposed fix from my friend Matt. So yeah. There's plenty of ways to remove it. The important thing is just to remember to remove it. There was a blog post like just a couple of weeks ago where someone, a brilliant guy called Adam Chester, found a bypass for constrained language mode. He did a lot of stuff. I mean, wow. It's a really, really good blog post. So it bypasses he managed to bypass constrained language mode in the environment he was in. And I talked to him before he published it. And one thing that maybe didn't get people saw was that if you enable DLL rules, this will actually be blocked. So even though it's a bypass, if you configure it correctly, this would have been blocked because you want DLL rules enabled. And that's why. So what it could do is it could actually load up a DLL using PowerShell from constrained language mode. So he found out that it's a pretty clever move still, and it's a great write-up. So it was just I need to highlight that if you configure it correctly, it will not work. But I have something else. So I started to look at preparing for this session, like early this summer. I was looking at every time I start PowerShell when I have AppLocker enabled. There's an error saying that the PSM1 file and the PS1 file under the temp folder was prevented from running. And I got curious, what is this? So here you can see I'm in a constrained language mode. And what I found out is that this is the way AppLocker figures out if it's in constrained language mode or not. So what you can do is redirect the temp area to a place where script execution is allowed. So when you then start PowerShell, it will be in full language mode. And that's freaking awesome. So I have a blog post that I have prepared. I haven't published it yet. I will publish it later today, where I have details about this. I did contact Microsoft about it. They didn't want to fix it because it's design. So here's the POC script I wrote. There's a better one in the module I will be releasing today, but just to show you what I've done. So the first thing is just to create two variables, setting the existing temp variables. And then I, of course, tells it where's the allowed place to execute scripts. And with the default rules, C Windows temp is allowed because everything on the Windows is allowed to run as scripts. So then I set my current user temp variables to these bypass paths. Then I use something called invoke VMI method to start another PowerShell session. Because if you start PowerShell by just typing PowerShell, it doesn't read the temp variable for some reason. And I tried a lot of different things, but this works. So you use VMI method, it rereads the temp variables, and you're good to go. And then I just set it back. So when you do that, you will have a full language PowerShell running. So let me show you, if you don't believe me. Let's see, just copy this. So here we are. Let's start PowerShell. So here I am in constrained language mode, right? So I'll just paste the script in. Boom. And we're full language. Oh, thank you. All right. That was a quick demo. Cool picture, though. Yeah, so that was the part of the scripting rules. Now I'm moving over to the MSI APX rules. So as you probably have figured out, I'm covering each section. So the problem with the MSI default rules is that it allows everything that is digitally signed. Everything that is digitally signed. Wow. Same goes for AppX. And that's a problem. Because getting a code signing cert, it's like $80. And it's not that hard to get it. And you can use something like MSF Venom or whatever to create an MSI file. And then you can just sign it using a sign tool. And then you just execute the payload and it runs. So that's an easy bypass for that, that rule. So that needs to be tweaked in order to harden it. So the mitigation is this is the best I've come up with, is to instead of allow everything to run, just allow at least only Microsoft MSI files to run. You can start there at least. That's better than everything. And also if you use SSCM, I would probably use something called managed installer. That's something you can enable in AppLocker. So everything that comes from SCCM will automatically be whitelisted. That's also something you can do. That's way beyond the top this talk, but yeah, that's also possible. And the same goes for AppX rules. Change it to allow only these two to run. Things from Microsoft. They have different certificates. I think there's a total of 3 basic, actually, but I've only listed 2 here. But instead of allowing everything to run, narrow it down to what you really want to run. Cool. Yes, and then you have something called known bypasses. Even though you configure everything correctly, there's still a lot of binaries that you can use to execute code to bypass the protection of AppLocker. So there's a lot of known discoveries made by other great people like Subt and Matt Graeber and all those guys, where you can use install util, msbuild, mshda, regasm, regsvc, and vstro files. I have a list. I have actually a GitHub repo called the Ultimate AppLocker Bypass List. And I try to update it as much as I can with new known techniques. So I recommend that you check that out when you start to harden your AppLocker environment, or if you're looking for a bypass. Depends on which side you're on. If we go beyond the default rules, I've seen places where they allow everything from Microsoft to run. It helps, but it doesn't help, especially when it comes to binaries like exe files, because there's a lot of, as you saw, even though you block these known bypasses and allow things for Microsoft to run, you still run into problems here. There's even more to block. Because if you allow everything from Microsoft, that means I can download things from Microsoft page, other tools, and run them. So, for instance, in this example here, oh, I messed up the slide. Okay, so when you allow everything from Microsoft to run, for instance, you can download bginfo, or you can download compilers and such, and run code that way. So there's known techniques to bypass AppLocker if you allow everything from Microsoft to run. So that there's a huge amount of binaries, and that's what I'm trying to map out in my AppLocker bypass list. So check it out. And a typical misconfiguration I see a lot, and I tweeted out like not that long ago that I think exceptions are evil. And Aaron Mergosis started to defend it, and that's fine. He had a good point. But still, I find them evil. So in AppLocker, you can either create a deny rule directly, like you create a new rule and say, I'm not allowing this to run, or you can go inside a rule, and there's a tab called exceptions, where you can add exceptions. So for instance, allowing everything under C Windows to run, except for folder A, B, C, and D, right? So when you do that, you kind of assume that you block execution from that place, right? So a thing I see, like for instance here, okay, this is a typical example where you deny iCackles directly. It will block it, right? But when you use an exception, there's a problem, because here is I'm inside the Windows folder. I'm adding an exception for iCackles. The problem here is that he has also allowed everything from Microsoft to run. So the problem here is that even though I'm thinking, okay, what should happen here? In my head, iCackle shouldn't be allowed to run. But that's not the case. It will actually be allowed to run since we have this rule here. So that's totally confusing, and I see this a lot. So I prefer to use strict deny rules and don't use exceptions. I think that's easier to maintain. The point Aaron had was that if you have admins, it makes it hard for you to kind of segregate what you allow for an admin to run and a user to run. So that's a good point. But in my opinion, when I harden clients, I will not allow any admin to log in there at all. They shouldn't log on ever. If you want to do something on a client, you push it to a system, SCCM or Altiris or something else. That's my opinion. Yeah, sorry. iCackles, why am I showing you this? Okay, I was supposed to show, okay, never mind. I went ahead and told you everything before I had the slides ready, so my bad. Yeah, so as I said, if you allow everything from Microsoft, you open the door for other binaries to run, such as bginfo. You can use that to execute code. You also have other binaries, such as CDB, and there's a long, long list. So just go into the GitHub repo, and you will see them all. There's a long list. And you can also visit the Lolbus project, where you can see different binaries that can do other stuff. That's a good resource as well. Okay, so hardening rules. If you go into that GitHub repo, I have pre-created all the rules you need to like totally lock it down. So I have default rules improved. That's instead of using the default rules, you can actually download that XML, and you can right-click inside where you configure AppLocker and import that rule set. And there's instructions on that GitHub repo. And the improved thing is that it doesn't allow everything from Microsoft to run as MSE files, for instance, allows everyone to run signed MSE files. It only allows from Microsoft, for instance. So I have pre-created that for you. And I also created all these block rules. So this includes blocking every known binary that does evil stuff that I know of. And it also includes alternate data streams as well. So feel free to use them. I haven't tested them a lot, so it could break things. So you need to like test them in an environment before you put it into production. That's at least my nah, never mind. It's all good. Yeah, production is test. Yeah, that's correct. That's correct. Okay, so back to AronLocker. I started looking into AronLocker because I was curious what this was. So it makes it a lot easier for us as IT admins to maintain a bigger rule set because it can scan the computer and add things that are missing in a more intelligent way than the default or create rules based on scanning from the AppLocker GUI. The only problem as of today is that it's missing rules for alternate data streams. So I reached out to Aaron about this last week. No, early this week. I can't remember. Anyways, he has said that he has almost ready to release his next version of AronLocker, where this is a part of the release, amongst other things. So he has fixed it. And I had prepared this slide to just show you the problem. This is an imported rule from AronLocker, where he has used exceptions for instance, tracing, but he has forgot the alternate data streams. So here you can just take an evil exe file, pipe it to tracing, as I showed you earlier in the demo, and you can use either bitadmin or, yeah, there's a lot of ways to execute alternate data streams. I have a complete list at the bottom if you're interested in alternate data streams. So that's a pretty good resource there. So how am I on time? 10 minutes still. Okay. So my recommendation, I prefer the default rules. That's number one. Always enable DLLs, even though it states there's a performance degrade. Isn't true. Okay, this is my recommendation. Not everyone agrees. It depends on your environment. I don't like exceptions because I find them confusing. I rather prefer deny rules. That's my opinion. And be sure to create deny rules for paths that users can, of course, write to. And also add ADS for the same paths. Create publisher deny rules for bad binaries, such as MS-build, PowerShell. Why would a user need to run PowerShell? I don't see the point. So create deny rules to block stuff. And of course, as I said, remove all the rules that allow every signed file to run. That's a bad idea. And last but not least, enable central monitoring. It's pretty easy actually to enable event forwarding in Windows. So you can take all the events you get from every workstation and put them into one central place. So you can see what has run, what has blocked, and whatnot. So that's something I recommend if you don't have like a CM solution where you can run a Splunk agent on the host or something. So yeah, that's something I would recommend. Yeah, so during my prep for this talk, I started early this year to create something that made it easier for me to discover these vulnerabilities, because that's important to me. I don't want to use a lot of time. So I released it 4 a.m. tonight or something. And the sweet thing about this is that it runs in constrained language mode. So you don't have to have like a full PowerShell language mode in order to run the module. So that's like a big thing when you like test on AppLocker. And I started out by doing like a lot of things like add type and all that stuff, and it gets blocked because of constrained language mode, of course. So I had to rewrite a couple of times, and Some of the code is not beautiful, but it works. And that's mostly because of constrained language mode. You have to be like really figure out ways to get around it. For instance, if you want to like check ACLs, you would have thought that that should be easy. So you can just get ACL in PowerShell, and you can get the ACLs. That's right. But if you want to set them, you cannot do it in constrained language mode because you have to have the ability to use the add type. Who would have figured? So I scratched my head a long time. I reached out to Carlos, and he reached out to Lee Holmes. And the only way he said it was possible was to sign it. So that's a workaround, but I don't want to do this project, of course. So yeah, there are some problems along the way here. So it automates a lot of the hunting for the vulnerabilities. I think it's good for both red and blue. And please note that it's not feature complete yet. It's still under progress, but at least have something to show for. So let me quick demo it for you. I still have some minutes left. 4? Cool. So on this host, this is the okay. Just let me close down some stuff here. So I have under my temp folder, I have all the functions. So I have separated each function into a file because I think that's easier to maintain. So first I just run PowerShell in an unrestricted mode so that I can run scripts. And then I go into my temp folder, PowerShell, and then I use import module like this. And now all the commandlets are in the memory. So I can, for instance, if I want to list out the rules, there are built-in commandlets for this, but I don't like them. I think they're too complex, so I like it easy. So if I do something like this, get PAL rules, I can choose what sort of rules I want. Do I want all rules? Do I want only hash rules, path rules, publisher rules? Yeah, so I want all. And then rule actions, maybe I want all, or maybe I just want the allow rules or the deny rules. So in this case, just everything. You can also specify SIDs if you want to search for a specific SID. Default it uses like everyone. You can also export it to an XML, and you can take it offline and use the same commandlets against the XML file to figure it out. 2 minutes left. Okay, cool. Yeah, so a lot of fun stuff. So if I run this, I can view the rules as this, and I can like go into each one of them. For instance, like this. And I can use rule list, and I get all the rules. So it's pretty nice. And I get the path, the original path, because there's a problem when you use AppLocker, when you use % program files. There's actually 2 paths. It's program files and program files x86. So I had to like split them out and stuff. So yeah, that's pretty awesome. Yeah, I don't got time to show you everything, but let me show you the constrained language mode bypass. So this will actually get all the script rules. It will figure out a path it can use to redirect the temp. And it doesn't change the temp variable. It actually just manipulates how the VMI method is invoked. So this is pretty cool. So just run it, bam. It figures out, finds a suitable location. It picks a random path out of the different paths it finds. And then it's just launch it. Change the temp variables and launch PowerShell. And there's also another cool thing. Let's see here. Bypass pawn. You can specify a binary, and it will figure out a place it can place the binary and execute it. And I'm also working on an addition where you can use ADS as a parameter at the end. So I can try. I think I have time to show it real quick. Oh, sorry. So yeah. Something went wrong. Okay, sorry. I'll fix that. But yeah. Damn it. I'm all out of time. If you want to see more, please just come grab me and I'll show you more. Sure. Thanks.